well, not through stabilization.
I mean,
We'd probably have to borrow. We'd probably have to borrow, depending on the cost.
probably.
To come back, and I apologize for running over a little bit. Okay, we're going to start without Franny. We'll start with citizens' concerns. If there's anybody in the audience who has a concern about anything not otherwise on our agenda. All right, seeing none. So chairman's update. I hope everybody's having a great summer. We had a beautiful Independence Day celebration on Friday, July 3rd at Nara Park. Great weather and attended by a lot of people, so thank you to everybody who was able to make it, and thank you to the recreation team for putting that together. And this Friday, Recreation is hosting the Glenn Miller Orchestra at Friday, July 10th at Nara Park, starting at 7 p.m., and tickets can be purchased ahead of time for $10. And if you are on the website purchasing tickets, I encourage you to also take the NARA Master Plan Survey. There's a link on the recreation site as well as on the town's homepage. And just as a reminder, the selectmen have rescheduled our goal-setting meeting to this Wednesday, July 8th at 6:30 p.m. at the Public Safety Facility. And that's all I have, Mr. Manager.
Thank you. First thing I'd like to announce that on, I believe it was last Wednesday, July 1st, the governor signed our special act that exempts our police department from civil service. As you recall, back at the November town meeting endorsed filing the special act. It took a while to work through it, but it is now official, and we're no longer under civil service. On the 22nd of June, the land use departments moved back into the north wing of Town Hall, and would encourage all you folks to just have a look at the new digs. It really came out well, and I think everybody is enjoying their new the new office space. I've spent a lot of time in the last few weeks bargaining with all 5 of our unions. We've had several sessions with our superior officers in police. We've had one session with patrol, one session with fire about advanced life support, one session with Teamsters who represent the dispatch union, and a couple sessions with AFSCME that represents the highway, municipal, and cemetery employees. We're very close to an agreement with superiors. I just have a couple other things to iron out. The rest of the units will be bargaining sometime both this month and in August. And finally, sometime the week of the 10th of August, we're going to need a very brief special selectmen's meeting because the easements for the Assabet River Rail Trail will need to be signed. They won't be ready for our August 3rd meeting because of some public notification that's required. So we'll be sending out some dates and times at a later date just to see if we can just grab you all for like 5 minutes and sign it. We only actually need 3 folks if it's that much of a problem. And I know we're going to talk about ALG in a little while, so I guess that's my report.
Thank you very much. Okay, so at 7:10, the Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on July 6, 2015 at 7:10 p.m. at Acton Town Hall, room 204, on the application of Hartz Corporation, 87 Hayward Road, Acton, for a site special permit number 052915-454 for a building, cafe addition, and parking lot expansion required under section 10.4 of the Acton zoning bylaw. All right, are there any folks from Hartz here tonight? Go. Sorry, can you just press the button to make sure your mic's on? Thank you.
There we go. Good evening. My name is Doug Sieber. I'm the Vice President. I'm the Chief Operations Officer of the Hartz Corporation. I'm here with 2 gentlemen, Brian Dunn, who is our civil engineer, as well as David Saltzman, who is our corporate architect. For those not familiar with Hartz, I think probably most of you are, and I thought I'd give you a little bit of a background. We make coated fabrics and molded fabrics for the automotive industry. In the say, recession, most of those fabrics were, and foams were PVC by nature. Now those polymers are no longer, you see them on interiors of automobiles. You'll see mostly thermoplastic olefins. The company has grown, and we've been here quite a while. You see a lot of our products as door panels and instrument panels on vehicles, from the Honda Pilot to a BMW X5 to a Chevy Impala to just your, a Ford F-150. Those like material when you put your hands on it. The last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a major change in our industry. The interiors of automobiles, which we primarily supply into, have become higher quality, softer haptic, a better feel and a better look. What comes along with that is the fact that I was telling these gentlemen earlier today, we've not seen a significant increase in the amount of yards that we actually manufacture per year. But what we've really seen our growth in sales dollars is that we're using a much higher end polymer in those products. What comes along, the unintended consequences that comes along with some of that is we have more chemical engineers working at Hartz today than we've ever had. And so the growth in our company with manpower has principally been in the technical end of our business. Our research and development for developing new uses and new polymers to be used for seamless airbags for the Toyota Corolla, to new haptic looks and feels for a Lexus door panel. What comes along with that is the fact that those new employees have a much higher want and desire for a workspace environment. We are 2 weeks away from getting our final occupancy permit on about a $2 million renovation of our main offices at the company. We basically, years ago, coming out of the recession, spent a lot of time and money being privately held and having the ability on our research and development end of our company. And that's put us in a very good position as we've come out of that to be one of the market leaders for innovation with regard to seamless airbags for instrument panels as well as high-end door panel material. This all has led to the fact that once we finished this renovation, we had a very small lunchroom where people would go and have lunch, and we were kind of shoehorning different engineering people in. With the renovation came a beautiful work environment, and I encourage anybody, we're very open as you know, anybody that likes to come down and take a look at the company and walk through, we'll be happy to show it to you. We still have the 5th grade class, science classes from the school come by for tours with Eric Hartz himself leading the tour. So you're more than welcome to come down and take a look. But it's really changed the dynamic of the company, and the people really like the work environment they're in. Part of that was that small lunchroom kind of had to get blown away to make room for some of the new space that we put in. I think in the industry, our architect told us that the average cubicle space now is around 6 by 8. Is that what you said? We didn't really think that was enough for the people that worked at our company. So we felt that given the types of products and work that they're doing, we needed to have something larger where they could have a little bit more room to spread out. Our cubicle size is 8 by 11, so it took up more square footage. We also added new and more modern conference rooms. Where this is kind of cascaded to is the want and desire of these same sort of folks to have a much larger and brighter lunchroom where they can go at lunchtime, meet, have a meal, and talk with their fellow engineers and some of the people in the facility and the plant. So that's the very first part of what we're trying to accomplish here tonight, is to get the approvals to move ahead with the cafeteria that we've laid out, which is just a lunchroom for us. I think it's 3,900 square feet, thereabouts. And the second part is to try to be clever about trying to add parking kind of closer to where people work. We realized that the lunchroom was going to eliminate some spaces in our front parking lot, but we do have parking out back. We wanted to try to use a clever use of the space. So we felt that if we tried to park on top of the current leach field, and our Brian here has done that work, it would be a good use of space, and would be an effective use for our employees, being that it's kind of on the lower part of our campus that we have here. So that's kind of the background, and I would answer any questions that people have about what we're trying to do, or if Brian can answer questions from the civil side, or David from the architectural side, and what we're trying to accomplish and what look we're trying to maintain.
I think this was Peter's application, so, or unless you wanted to say something first. You've got to speak into the mic, unfortunately, just for our TV audience.
Just wanted to mention a few other things, which is, I guess it's shown better there. Hi, I'm David Saltzman. I'm from David Saltzman Architects. I am the architect. I wanted to point out that the building is set back to the side of 3 buildings here. So it's a new addition, I'll say, 3,900 square foot addition. So it's sort of, it's not like something that you see, so it's set back. That's one thing I wanted to point out. The other thing is that this wall here for the cafeteria, we decided to make it into sort of like a wall of glass for them for the people to sit here. It's actually a lunchroom setting in the cafeteria, and our hope is to have solar panels up here to show some progressive signs that Arts is doing in their technical field. So it's a two-edged sword. It sets solar for the technical, and then also the glass for people to come from inside the building and see the inside.
Great. Okay, thank you.
And my name is Brian Dunn. I'm with MBL Land Development and Permitting with offices at 480 Turnpike Street in Southeastern. We're the civil engineers of record and the surveyor of record. And as Doug just spoke about, the new addition going into the existing parking lot, and then the other parking lot we have on the other plan, if I'll show the members of the board, is over an existing septic system that's actually being expanded. So it's a real good use of the area that's already been previously developed. So this plan here shows where the cafeteria addition is. And this is where the cafeteria addition is. Like David said, in between 2 buildings, with parking here, parking on the layout of the paved road. And then also the additional parking over the existing septic system. And you can see the expansion of the septic system in this area that is my understanding has already been approved by the Board of Health for this expansion. And then our proposed grading
Yeah, sorry, they're just going to ask you to speak into the mic. It's just being broadcast on our TV. So.
Understood. So the new parking lot to the inside of the lot has a septic system that's being expanded on, and that will be built at the same time as the parking lot. And what we did was we graded this parking lot so it would meet the Title V standards of cross slope, so we can't put catch basins and drain manholes in the area of the septic system. So the whole lot is being graded to a new detention basin to the north end of the parking lot, all outside of the floodplain, all outside of the wetland buffer zones, but also in compliance with DEP's stormwater regulations. So we've got additional parking spaces in the rear as well as the cafeteria addition up front.
Okay, great, thank you. So Peter's the assigned selectman, so why don't we start with you, Peter?
I just want to run through the comments of the various engineering department and the planning department that they had to the plans. I don't think there are any serious objections. I just want to make sure these issues are addressed. One point is the reason for the new parking lot is because of the increase in employees. As I understand it, the zoning bylaw sets parking for an industrial or commercial site like this based on the number of employees on a particular shift. Hartz has 250 employees that work the night shift.
That would be days.
Days?
250 days.
Okay, and the parking was a pre-existing non-conforming use, but because they're doing work on the property, they have to now come into conformance. So the total number of parking spots with the new addition of, I think, 40 parking spaces You lose some to the new cafeteria is going to be 251 on site.
That is correct.
That's the reason for the additional parking. But basically, let me just run through these quickly and get the engineer's response to the engineering department's comments dated June 25th. The first comment was the rainfall data for the 100-year storm should be 6.5 inches, not 6 inches as used in the report. I mean, the basic comment seems to be that under your calculations, the post-development drainage would be more than the pre-development drainage, and the bylaw requires that it be less, I guess.
Right. You know, using the different rainfall data, it's, you know, where, you know, it can shift a little bit as you read the rainfall data maps. So in the town of Acton, maybe they're more conservative using 6.5. We don't have an issue with changing the calculations, but at the end, it's really going to be the same drainage calculations and the same drainage design. So the half an inch over a 24-hour period really isn't going to change anything that dramatically, but we don't have any issues with changing that.
Okay, but is the final flow rate in the post-development going to be less than the flow rate in pre-development?
Yes, we can make sure that does that. Yes, sir.
Okay, and then they want to see a plan by a professional hydrogeology engineer.
On the volume, yes.
Okay.
Most of these comments that we're reading and received from the planning board office are all easily addressable.
Okay, this is the engineering I'm looking at.
And even the engineering letter. I mean, we've got the letter from the water department too. All of these comments are really minor in nature and it can be addressed.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're aware of them and that they'll be dealt with. There was no information provided us for soil data that needs to be provided.
Right, I think that was inadvertently not in the report when we did it because we scanned it in.
Okay.
So we'll make sure that it's there because we do have soil data.
Right, and I think these are typical comments that we see.
Yeah, like I said, they're really
permits,
easy to address.
And earth removal calculations we need also.
Understood.
Total suspended solid removal calculation had to be corrected apparently.
Yeah, this is an easy fix. We're gonna put a water quality structure prior to the 4-bay, and that'll bump us up.
Okay.
Way over 80%.
Okay. There's one issue here. I just was speaking with the planning department before I came up here, and this might be for the board to decide. The sidewalk requirements weren't addressed. The comment in the engineering department is this is not addressed. Let's see. I believe the planning department's comment was that the site has two frontages. It fronts Hayward Road and it fronts Charter Road. On the Charter Road side, there already is a sidewalk along the frontage of the Hart's site. On the Hayward Road site, there is a sidewalk on the other side of the street, the south side of Hayward Road, whereas the site is on the north side. So then the question under the sidewalk regulations would be whether the corporation should build a sidewalk along their frontage on the north side. Sometimes, and I don't see comments from the sidewalk committee here. I haven't had a chance to contact them to see why they didn't comment on this, because I think normally they would. Sometimes on these kinds of redevelopments, the town requires a contribution to the sidewalk fund where there already is a sidewalk, not directly on the frontage, but right across the street, as well as I think there's a crosswalk there to get to that sidewalk from Hart's. I'm told from the planning department that in subdivisions, what the planning board considers is $50 a linear foot for a contribution to the sidewalk fund. This 1,600 feet of frontage on Hayward Road, so that's an $80,000 number, which is fairly substantial. So that's just a question I have. We can waive the sidewalk requirements based on the current conditions. I have not had a chance yet to figure out what we've done in the past with similar kinds of sites. So that's just a question I have. But there were questions about the lighting and whether you would get a lighting engineer to provide calculations about the light that would be coming out of the LED fixtures that you're going to install as opposed to the current fixtures that are there. I guess we've had an experience recently on the CVS site in town where LED lights actually turned out to be much more bright than the former kind of lights that we were used to dealing with. And so, you know, I guess there should be less wattage used if you use an LED lights or whatnot.
Right, you're absolutely correct. So I think we can work with Doug and David and to get an electrical engineer on board to satisfy the selectmen's concerns and the planning board's concerns.
Okay, we would appreciate that because we've had a lighting bylaw for a number of years. Light pollution is a big issue in town. We like to see stars at night around town. The lights should be directed down. The lights need to be shielded correctly, whatnot. So, yeah.
I would add, I agree with you. I think if you look at the site that we have right now, all our lights are shielded on top, directed down. We have used LED in some areas and replaced older lighting with LED. But when we have done that, we've also looked at what the lumen level is at the ground level in the different areas, and that can easily be calculated. And we can certainly work with the town if you have a specified lumen level at the ground level. You can target those LED lights to hit exactly that level.
Okay, that'd be great. I mean, it's certainly an environmental good thing that LED lights use a lot less energy, as well as I suppose your electric bill, but we do have experts in town who have worked with us to put together these lighting bylaws, and if you could deal with the planning department about those issues.
Yeah, that's easy. I think what in the plans themselves, that has the LED lumens at the ground level, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that plan right there, which they can review, will show them what the lumens are at the level of the parking lot itself. And so if someone comes back and says, hey, what are those, 5.5, or 3, and they say, we would prefer dial it in to 3.5, you can very easily dial in the lumen level of the LED lights to that specific, as long as you have the coverage. That's the big thing. You want to make sure people are safe in that
right.
parking lot.
I think they had some questions about those calculations and whether they needed to be looked at more closely or something. I mean, This is just a memo. You may have seen this, hopefully. It's only dated July 1st from the planning department, so I'm not sure you've had an opportunity.
They were concerned on the wattage and the power usage.
Yeah.
And we had originally provided this plan as part of our set, and then tweaked it a little bit after meeting with the planning office back in June 23rd. So, you know, we've been working with the planning office to do exactly what they've been asking us to do. And I think what Doug was just saying is that we can make sure that the electrical engineer has the right information to make sure that the LEDs are able to dial in and make sure that we have the right wattage and the foot candles at the base of the poles. But as you can see that we're not shedding, right now as we have this proposed, we're not shedding, you know, an exuberant amount of light off the property. In fact, it's coming down to 0 after we get off the property. So we've done our best to make that effort.
Okay.
And we do understand the concerns of like the CVS's and the Cumberland Farms and some of these gas stations that have these small light poles, and it looks like it's daytime, and that's not what we're doing here.
Okay. I mean, I think that basically covers most of it. So, as I understand, what planning is suggesting is either they simply write up a decision which would include all of these conditions that they've asked for, make sure the plans are accurate and whatnot, and we would vote on that at the next meeting, or I think the owner has requested an expedited decision where we would vote tonight, including all these conditions, and delegate to the chair the authority to sign the decision. So that's up to the board to decide. There were a couple of comments by the design review board that are simply recommendations. They're not part of our bylaw, but they had a question about the number of parking spaces, but the spaces you're putting in are required in the bylaw, so that's not an issue. They had a question about the minimum planting between the cafeteria and the parking lot. It's supposed to be a 10-foot space. Planning says that you've increased the landscaping in that area.
Yes, we've increased that even in the back lot as well.
Okay, it's hard to make it comply because of, you need the parking spaces. You'd lose parking spaces if you expanded it, so.
And then the other thing, Mr. Berry, we have is the septic system that's
right
underneath there. So I can't put big trees in the islands. So we tried to make sure that we had grasses in the middle, and then when the septic trenches were not exposed anymore, underneath the ground, we made sure we could put a tree there. So we were very specific on where we placed the trees.
Okay. They suggested putting bollards in front of the glass exterior just for safety purposes. I don't know if that makes sense to you folks, but.
I mean, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, we certainly understand that. We have them throughout the facility on corners and things, so whatever we would do to make that front part of the parking lot as safe as possible is not an issue.
Okay, I think, you know, there are other issues in here, but again, I agree with the civil engineer. They're not major issues. They can be contained in conditions in a decision, and so it's the board's choice whether to, first of all, waive the sidewalk requirement, and second of all, how to deal with the decision, I guess.
Okay, other questions from board members? Janet?
First question, would you just confirm that this whole project is entirely outside of the 100-foot buffer zone for the wetlands? Because we're looking not at big plans like this, where I was looking on my little laptop at the plan and trying to focus on, and I think I see the wetland setback, 100-foot, 75 feet, and it looks as if it's all entirely the wetlands line, but then those dotted lines, those are the wetlands, and then the setback, though, 100-foot seems to be entirely beyond the work site, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
So when we were hired by Harts, one of the things that we said, we want to do a full survey of all the existing conditions, wetlands, get everything delineated, so we know what our impacts to the environmental areas are. And we made sure when we were designing this, that we were looking at an area that doesn't have trees for a new parking lot, out of the flood zone and out of the 100-foot buffer zones.
Okay. I heard you say that you had gotten Board of Health approval for the expanded septic system, because I know the health department had written, these are comments June 29th, they said any septic system being paved over must be approved for H20 loading and vented, and I know you mentioned loading, which means absolutely nothing to me, but I assume if you said that the Board of Health approved the system that you've met whatever that requirement is.
Two things. When I was initially talking about the grading of the parking lot, that the grades on the lot that we have there meet the Title V grading over a septic system. Two, when the previous engineer designed the expansion, because they had extensive knowledge of the septic system, we reviewed the plans that were sent to the Board of Health. They do recognize that the tanks in the system does allow for H20 loading, and H20 loading is really highway capacity for highway trucks. But this is a parking lot for vehicular, cars and vehicles, and not necessarily trucks are going to be driving up here. But if a truck does go up in this area, the construction standards would allow that to happen.
So you're over designing, basically.
That is correct.
Okay. And then there was a mention in the health department's memo about the possible need for a food service permit because of the cafeteria. I don't know if you've had a chance to confer with the health department about that.
Well, we're not preparing food. This is a cafeteria where people go with lunches, or they'll buy a sandwich out of a machine or a soda
Okay.
out of a machine.
So you're not, there's no kitchen or
No,
anything? Okay.
there's some microwaves, but there's no kitchen. So it's basically heating up soups and things along that line.
And it will require the water and the soap to clean out the microwave, which of course everybody does conscientiously after every use, right?
Absolutely.
Anyhow, on the DRB memo, the only question I had was whether all of this glass was sort of treated to control the amount of heat that, well, I mean, obviously it's nice to have the warmth coming in the wintertime when it's cold outside, but I don't know if you've kind of dealt with the glass in a way so that
Yeah.
people aren't overheated.
Yeah, well, we're going to design a Meco shade system, which is a very high-end horizontal filtering system, which will come up and down on each of the windows. So there'll be controls to.
Very fancy. Now, that might be worth seeing, you know, that might be interesting to see. And then, and I guess that you're increasing impervious pavement, what, by half an acre? I was looking at the numbers here.
It's a very small amount, and then the stormwater for the front is actually going back under the building to the back of the site. So it's really not even going out to the front of the site because we're capturing it like it is in its existing state.
Okay, and can you explain, I was looking at this diagram. Does this, you've got two drainage areas that are going to go first into this proposed
Basin.
whatever, detention basin before they the water goes to the wetlands. Are the other drainage areas is that the way they are currently? Is that?
Yeah, so that you have an existing model and a proposed model. And then what we do is we actually look at both of them to compare the rates of runoff and volumes. So that's the model you see in front of you.
But these, all except for these two, they drain straight into the wetlands? Is that what that means? I realize that these are areas, okay.
Those are actually proposed, proposed development areas that are already going to the wetlands. So we're not changing any of that.
Okay, and then the proposed detention basin is really maybe to compensate for the fact that you're adding a little bit of impervious surface.
Right, so we're adding, if you look at this plan here, we're adding this entire area as a paved area. So we need a way to control it and infiltrate it and then let it flow to the wetlands. And even when we change the drainage calculations, even if we were in a flooding condition, we'd be flooding ourselves. So it's not like we're flooding the neighbors out.
Okay. And I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Questions this end, Franny? You gotta turn on your mic.
First of all, where on that map that you have there is that sort of lone building that's at the right? Is that?
This is it, yeah.
This building right here.
Oh, I can't see it from here. Okay, so that's okay. I was sort of struck, I sort of drove in, I hope that was okay, to peek.
I'll let
at
Dave.
where it was. And I was struck by, there isn't very much green space. There's a lot of pavement around. And I'm surprised that somehow, I guess there are a lot of trucks that go through, so you weren't able to find parking elsewhere, because it looked like a lone green area that was going to be paved over.
Yeah, that's where the existing septic system is.
Yeah.
The trucks that come into the facility enter and go to the right of that building and then up around to the back.
Okay.
And then when they leave, they come down and they go to the right of that building again. So it's one-way traffic going up and one-way traffic going back down.
Okay.
if you've been to the site and have driven around the back of the site, there's some parking in the back, and obviously if we wanted to, we could try to expand that parking. But then that's starting to push back into the area that's like where you see Charter Road is, and it cuts back in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
And it would involve cutting down a lot of trees where there are no trees that exist on this site already.
Yeah.
One of the better things for us about having it here is it's a good use of that site because it sits up as it is anyway. But it's also, for professional staff, it's a lot closer to get into the building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you think people arguing or over what cubicle they want is high on the parking is much higher on a pecking order where people park than what cubicle they get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, and I also just highlighted 2 sets of stairs. So there's access from this new parking lot to the front buildings as well as the building that you see highlighted in blue.
Oh.
So it can be utilized by either people going to that building or the main building.
Okay, but I assume you have handicapped access to other parking spaces?
Right, there's handicapped access in the front of the building.
And there, okay. About the question about why sidewalk didn't make a comment, I don't know, I sort of looked at the 2 names on the email, and it looked like it went to town departments, because I didn't remember seeing this plan through Transportation Advisory Committee either. So I'm not sure if sidewalk got it. I was wondering about the width of the sidewalk across the street. Like, I don't know if we can ask, I mean, we really can't ask for participation in a sidewalk that's already existing and no trouble, but when we go to fix up that sidewalk, if we want to increase ridership to the schools, that tiny little sidewalk would be due to be widened and improved. And so we could consider that, somehow getting help from Hearts for that. Also, that Phragmites, I have a nice fond feeling about Hearts because I remember Eric Hartz offering the Phragmites weeds from right next to the river for a project for Earth Day where we were making these weetus years ago. And also, Eric came to the Transportation Forum in 2006. And unfortunately, we couldn't work out times of day. But my question is, while we're just talking about your land and everything, is there any effort to replace that Phragmites? That's on your land, right? The Phragmites is the weed,
if you go over Hayward Road, or over Route 2 on Hayward Road, once you cross over, there's a section of that land that's still the buffer of the Department of Public Utilities, and I'm not exactly sure how many feet that is, but you will hit some of that area in through there.
Okay, no, I meant right next to your parking lot, where those reeds that are...
Next to this parking lot, or next to when you first...
Yeah, right to the right. Anyway, I just wondered if, I noticed behind the Elm Street, the school, next to Douglas School, there was a beautiful milkweed, not milkweed, what's the other thing that replaces Phragmites? Cattail, replacing it, and I was thinking how neat it would be if... Yeah, it's on the right as you go in.
So it's the...
Anyway, I wanted to draw your attention to it because it's sort of invasive, not...
It's in the grass area.
Yeah, it's right.
Are you
just
talking
down
in the
slope.
wetland part of that?
Yeah. Is that your land?
It is. I'm not sure. I mean, if memory serves me right, and there maybe Dean might remember because I can't, but I think that whole wetland eventually goes up and then feeds under Route 2 and eventually feeds over toward the Conan Well area. So
anyway, keep an eye on it.
We protect it as much. That's why we put the whole grass buffer zone in there and then try to keep the curbing in there to make sure there's no runoff into that area.
Oh, okay. No, I was just thinking, ultimately, if you wanted to do things to improve your land, it might be to try to replace that plant with cattails or something that's...
I think if you're familiar with Dick Hatfield, who's our Director of Environmental Affairs, who's a town resident and lives here, I'll bring it up with him and see what his plans are.
But I always I notice those because we would use them for those things. Anyway, otherwise, as long as the things that planning and engineering said are dealt with. I don't have trouble with it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jing-Sung, any questions?
No, Peter and Janet pretty well covered everything I was going to ask, so.
Okay, great. I just want to say, I think looking at this in the comments, as Peter noted, most of them can be dealt with pretty easily, and, you guys are professionals and have working with people who have done this a lot, so I don't have any concerns with expediting it. I think figuring out the sidewalk thing is a concern, or not a concern, just something we have to decide. I mean, there's existing sidewalk there, so I'm not really concerned. I know sometimes we've asked for a contribution to the sidewalk fund. 80,000 is a lot. Maybe we ask for something smaller or waive it. I don't feel strongly. And then, the lighting was a concern of mine, but I think you addressed that very well. It's really neat to hear how much you can tailor it, so I appreciate those.
I really think you want to look at like lumens or foot candles at the surface and not wattage, because if you're dealing with wattage, it's going to be different if you're LED metal halide or whatever. So fluorescent.
And we actually had to put a conversion because actually your bylaws are in wattage and not in lumens.
Right, we have not updated them. I agree with that. And I'm not a lighting engineer, so you may be absolutely accurate. I think there might be somebody here tonight who
I think if you look at, and I'm not semi-guessing, but I'm giving, educate. If you look at like some of the, an auto dealer, and he's in the 8 to 10 range for lumens on the surface at the dealership. If you look at an adequately lit parking lot, not what you might have at the CVS, because I have not seen it at night, you're probably in the 3, 4, 5 range, 3 range on the low end, 5 maybe on the well-lit side. If you start to get down to 2, you're not risking someone falling, but you're really not lighting up enough. So I think you need to be in that 3 to 5 range is adequate. And again, one thing I'd precursor that with is it also depends on how high you put the light. So, if you want to have, say, 5 lumens on the ground, and you want the pole to be 40 feet, you have to put a lot of power in that LED light, and that's going to give you a lot more light pollution than if you keep the thing at 15 feet. You can come down in the amount of the size of the LED light and also the wattage that you would use. So lower lighting capped down is certainly a better way to go about doing it.
Okay, let me ask you how you feel about the sidewalk issue. I don't know if you've dealt with the town before on these issues.
We have. Back many years ago, we put it in a building. 17, it was around 68,000 square feet, I think.
99 or 98.
Yeah, it was like 98 or 99. And at that time frame, what we did was we gave a contribution. We gave a contribution to the sidewalk fund, which if everybody remember Don Johnson, if that rings a bell, I think what we ended up trying to do was we used some of that money was earmarked to buy the land from Charlotte Sagoff at the very top of Hayward Road to widen Hayward Roads and give it better access, not only for the school buses going up and down Hayward Road, but for the trucks leaving or coming from Harts going up and down Hayward Road. So we've dealt with it in the past. I don't think it was $80,000 because there's so much footage there, and I believe, and we'd have to check the records, and Dean might remember more than me, but I think Harts donated a lot of money to add that sidewalk down Charter Road on that let's say, I think it's the west side of the plant that before it crosses Charter Road and goes on the other side. So, we're certainly amiable to having some sort of a contribution to the sidewalk fund if need be.
Okay.
I would suggest we could make that a condition of working out something that with the planning department that they would consider adequate too.
Okay. So I think there's some audience questions, so I'll just ask you guys to step aside real quick. Thank you. You would identify yourself, sir?
My name's Jim Snyder-Grant, 18 Half Moon Hill. What I wanted to bring to your attention, to the board's attention, to the applicant's attention, is our wonderful new bicycle parking bylaw in the zoning law, which requires adequate bicycle parking to the tune of, let's see, one bicycle parking space for each 20 motor vehicle parking spaces. And it defines, where that bicycle parking should be and what, the quality of the construction and the type of the construction. The carrot in this is that providing each 6 bicycle parking spaces provided, which can typically fit into less than a single car space, reduces the need for in the bylaw, reduces the need for off-street parking spaces. So it would not cause an increase in the paved surface. So I was just going to recommend that you make sure that the 6.3.7 part of the zoning bylaw, the bicycle parking, is adhered to in this, because I believe any special permit that comes before the board triggers this bicycle parking requirement. And if the applicants have any, if the applicants or the board have any comments about that now, I'd love to know, plans for bicycle parking. Thank you.
I think, Peter can address it, but it is in one of the...
Yeah, planning has addressed this issue. The way that they're applying the bylaw is calculating the number of bicycle spaces required off the number of new parking spaces that are being built on the site. So since there's 40 spaces, they're requiring 2 bike parking spaces. There was a concern, again, one of these minor issues between where it was located on the plans, and 2 different plans had different sites for the bicycles. But that would be one of the conditions in the decision, that the siting of these 2 bicycle racks be identified accurately on the plan. So.
Mr. Berry, again, we added some more bike parking to our plan, but there's actually an existing bike parking located in the front parking lot, and I think that Mr. Seaver can justify that, even though it's there, no one uses it. So it's something that's been there in existence, and then we did show another location for that revised area.
We do know 6.37. We understand the way it was interpreted by the planning board, and we will go to and add to the number of bike parking. I wish we had more of our employees live in Acton, Concord, Carlisle, but unfortunately, the vast majority of people that work at our place do not live in the area. I think Dick Hatfield's our only Acton resident. He's our Director of Environmental Affairs, and Eric lives in Concord. And I think separate of that, there's very few people that live close enough that they want to risk riding a bike on Route 27 at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, again, it might be different than maybe how it can be looked at for a smaller business or a storefront business or a drugstore or something along that line. But we certainly understand it. We saw the recommendation of the planning board, and we plan on adding to what we currently have to bring it up to the compliance that they're requested.
Okay, that's great. Let me just say that I think one of the purposes of the bylaw is to encourage more future biking travel to work. We broke ground on the new Bruce Freedom Rail Trail. It goes to Lowell, and we'll be going through West Acton down to Sudbury, right?
East North Acton.
East and North Acton, I guess, okay. Not West Acton, I'm sorry, North Acton and East Acton. The Assabet River Rail Trail will probably break ground in it's partially built already, probably break ground in the spring to come from Marlboro, Hudson, through Maynard into Acton, into the train station. We have a complete streets policy that has been identified as one of the top 10 complete streets policies in the country. You will see more bike lanes along major roads in Acton being developed as we repave streets. And I would encourage employees and employers in town to help the health of their employees and help the environment by encouraging more bike riding to work. So, thank you.
And you can tell your employees that we have bike lockers at the train station. So if they want to take the train, keep their bike there, get their bike out of the locker, conveniently lock it at your new, bike parking space, and then bike back to the train. Also a good option. So there are increasing options, I think, is our point, and we're glad to see that you're adding at least a few additional spaces. So thank you for that. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Dean Charter, 81 Charter Road. I'm a direct abutter to the site. I'm fortunate in that I have lots of good neighbors, and I count Hart's as one of my best neighbors. Some of the comments about the loss of green space within the campus that they've spoken about, basically paving over their septic system, I think you should keep in mind that they've got a very large area of woodlands along Route 2 and actually directly behind my house that they put under a conservation restriction. So that's very significant, certainly for wildlife, more so than a small area within their campus. So I think from an environmental point of view, they've done a great job. As far as the light spill issue goes, again, I back up to their rear parking lots and have no light spill at all from that parking lot. In fact, the only light spill I get in my yard is actually from the school campus, which is exempt from zoning, ironically, so therefore exempt from the lighting bylaw, but that's much more intrusive in the neighborhood than any of the light spill from Hart's, which is basically nil. So I'd certainly recommend that you approve them in their application. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you're enjoying your retirement.
I am.
Still coming to our meetings. Citizen Charter, yeah, we need a new title. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Okay, and then my last question for you guys would be if you would be okay if we did go ahead and expedite this, including a condition that we would, work between you guys and planning to figure out a contribution to the sidewalk fund or something. So we just didn't make it specific.
Certainly, that's fine, and they can work directly with me. We can come up with something.
Okay, so
we did that the last time.
Okay, great.
So.
Yeah, that's what it seems. Okay, so let's close the hearing and then just any discussion or further concerns from the selectmen. Are people generally okay expediting it and just leaving it up to, the planning will put in the various conditions noted in their memo and the engineering memo and work on the contribution to the sidewalk fund, and then I can sign it. Okay, so Peter.
Is that a motion? I'll make a motion that we approve this application on the conditions that they satisfy the comments of the planning department and the engineering department, and work out a reasonable contribution acceptable to the town and to Hart's Corporation for contribution to the town sidewalk fund, and delegate to the chair the authority to sign a decision incorporating those conditions.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so I apologize, we're running a little late, but we will ask our next applicant, New England Wellspring, for the medical marijuana dispensary. So if you guys wouldn't mind coming up and introducing yourselves, please.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Dr. Stephanie Lipton. I'm the president of both New England Wellspring and Mass Wellspring, and we're actually applying for a medical marijuana license for both the dispensary and cultivation site under the name Mass Wellspring here in Acton. And part of the requirement by DPH in order to obtain that license is to get the approval from the town and receive a letter of either approval or a letter of non-opposition to supplement our application. I believe I gave you all the information, just a brief synopsis of some of the individuals on our team and what it is we're hoping to accomplish. And I just wanted to touch on some of the highlights of our organization. We are a nonprofit organization, and we will be both cultivating and dispensing medical marijuana. The difference between our dispensary and the other applicants is that we are primarily patient-driven, and that our dispensary is going to be primarily delivery service in nature. And
so I apologize,
yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I just have to read these this one notice for
Yeah,
hearing at 8
that's
o'clock,
fine.
and I'm gonna have to do it again at 8:05,
Okay, no problem.
so I apologize.
Okay.
The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing notice on July 6, 2015 at 8 p.m., rescheduled from June 22nd, in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, 204 at Town Hall, on the application of 7th Settlement LLC, doing business as True West, 525 Massachusetts Ave, Acton, Mass, under Section 140 of the Massachusetts General Laws for a common victualler license. Okay, I apologize.
That's okay. So our dispensary differs from the other dispensaries in that we are going to be primarily delivery-based. And since these dispensaries are regional dispensaries, we will be providing delivery service to all registered patients, registered with the Department of Health, all patients within the state of Massachusetts, because we feel that this is the best form of medicine for people is to deliver it to them. When you're ill or when you're sick with a debilitating disease, the last thing you want to do is have to drive to a dispensary that may be several towns away, 30, 40 minutes away, and try to navigate your way into whatever complex they're situated. So we feel that the highest standard of care would be to deliver this medicine to our patients, and that distinguishes us from the other dispensaries that are currently applying. We have several healthcare professionals on our team. We also have an individual who has engineering experience in security systems. He has designed and implemented security systems for pharmacies and municipal buildings. We have individuals that are experienced in business and sales. I'm a veterinarian. I am USDA certified, and I've held a DEA license in good standing for 18 years. I currently have a mobile veterinary practice, so I am proficient in ordering, compounding, administering, and delivering controlled substances. The same controlled substances that they use in people are the same substances we use in dogs and cats and horses. So I'm quite proficient in their use and recording, and I can meet all the requirements of the Department of Health when it comes to record keeping and securing the medical cannabis. So security is going to be a big feature with these dispensaries, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read the regulations. They're about 52 pages. It's a little bit long, but if you haven't read them, I would encourage you to read through it, and you'll get a better understanding of the heightened level of security that exists around these dispensaries. And this protects the employees, the neighbors of the towns they're situated, and the patients. And the level of security is quite higher than it is for established pharmacies at this rate. And we're also going to have an organic base to our medical marijuana, so everything is going to be organic and hydroponically grown. All waste will be composted, so we'll have minimal waste. And because we are primarily a delivery system, there'll be minimal traffic coming into the dispensary site. We hope to employ between 20 and 30 people initially, and if we expand, obviously we'd be hiring more employees. So that's sort of the basic idea of what it is we're trying to accomplish here. We do need to get that letter of approval or non-opposition. And in case you're wondering what that means, it just means that you're not going to obstruct our efforts to try to open a dispensary or provide this medicine to the patients of Massachusetts. The Attorney General stated that towns are not allowed to obstruct the efforts of dispensaries from opening, and DPH wants to take that one step further and just ensure that these towns are willing to work with the dispensary owners and operators and not try to obstruct their efforts when they try to conduct business in a legal manner.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Are there questions from the board members? Peter, to start us off.
I'm sorry, I may have missed this, but you say you're a delivery service. That means people will not visit your facility to pick up their medical marijuana, that you deliver it to their homes? Is that what you're doing?
They can come to the dispensary. Some of them may want to come to the dispensary so we can counsel them. Part of having a dispensary is counseling people on the different modes of administering medical marijuana. You can do it through suppositories, tinctures, vaporizing. And so they need to be educated on what their options are. We can do that within the dispensary, but we would like to be able to go to their homes and take some of that intake information. But they do have the option of coming into the dispensary to see what it's like, to get more information if they prefer. But most of this, in my mobile practice, I've learned over 18 years that most of what's done in a facility can be done in the home, and especially this.
Okay. Sorry, Peter, before you go again, I'm just going to read the next hearing.
Okay.
The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on July 6, 2015 at 8:05 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, 204 at Town Hall on the application of 7th Settlement South LLC under Section 140 of the Massachusetts General Laws for a pledge of license and an alteration of licensed premises.
And I understand you're going to be cultivating and distributing this on the same site. Is that what you're saying?
Well, all dispensaries have to do their own cultivation.
Right.
You can cultivate in one area and dispense in another, or you can have both in one site. We would prefer to have both in one site, but sometimes finding a property is difficult.
Yeah.
So if we have to separate the two, then that would be one of the options.
Okay, and so if you were to cultivate and distribute on the same site, do you have an estimate of how large a facility you'd be looking for?
Right, and this is Olaf Ingar. He has more details on what it is that we'd be looking for in terms of site and square footage.
Sorry, can you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Sorry about that. My name is Olaf Ingar, and we'll probably start with 5,000 square feet for our cultivation.
Okay, and you'd be operating just normal business hours, or do you operate 24 hours a day growing marijuana, or what's the business plan?
Yeah, growing is 24/7, right?
Okay.
But people coming to our store, that is the regular store hours.
Okay, and you don't, it's just growing marijuana, so there's no fumes or noxious fumes or light?
No, we will have active carbon filters, so there's no odor, and the public will not have access to the cultivation area.
Yeah.
So it's totally enclosed area where only authorized people can access.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a question about the process. I mean, it sounds like you haven't identified a site yet that may be proprietary information. I don't know. Is that?
We're currently looking.
Okay.
We'll let you know as we know more. Yeah.
But you would be located in Acton. That's why you need this letter.
That's
okay.
Correct.
And there are a number of people on your corporate documents who aren't listed, on little bios here.
Yes.
Is the process you basically apply to the state Department of Health, and they're the ones that do the background checks of everybody who's involved in the operation?
They do the background checks. We also will be doing the background checks. In the past, it was just DPH doing the background checks, and there were a few hiccups that occurred when they hired a certain service. So it falls on the responsibility falls on the dispensary applicants and DPH. They'll be doing thorough background checks on everyone.
Okay. Fine. I mean, you mentioned that you distinguish yourselves from other applicants. I'm not aware that we have any other current applicants in Acton. You're talking about statewide.
Yeah, statewide.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, because these are regional, and
right.
And in the past they required the dispensaries to deliver. That is no longer a requirement, so dispensaries do not have to deliver. So that makes it difficult for patients that can't get out, patients that don't have caregivers. And right now, the Massachusetts state law allows a hardship cultivation license. And what that means is if it's difficult for you to get to a license, to a dispensary, and or if it's a far distance away, you can get a license to grow medical marijuana in your apartment or in your home. And so that becomes problematic, I think, for towns, because people are not required to have enhanced security features in their homes. And if you're disabled and you're living in an apartment complex and you're growing marijuana, all your neighbors are going to know that you're growing marijuana because you're not going to have the ventilation system. So I feel like it behooves towns to have something in place or something regional so that you're securing the medical marijuana. You're not having to deal with diversion. Diversion is a big concern that a lot of towns have. The best way to prevent diversion is to have it in a secured environment, and that's what a dispensary is for.
From what I've been reading, there's an issue with banks accepting
Yes.
deposits from
Yes.
these companies because of the federal prohibitions on this. So is everybody dealing in cash that's running these facilities?
A lot of places are dealing in cash. What some states like Colorado are currently doing is they're preparing to, I believe they're preparing to open credit unions for dispensary owners and operators so that they do have a bank where they can deposit checks, they can process credit cards, so on and so forth. But you know, the current feeling, and I don't know this as fact, is that the Obama administration is going to come out with some sort of ruling before he leaves office just to clarify this, because it's sort of a sticky wicket for the patients within the different states, but also recreationally in the states where there is recreational marijuana. Thank you.
Janet?
So I think that you answered one of my questions, which probably the answer should have been obvious, but it's all internal, indoor cultivation, right, with venting systems. So yeah, that helps to control the supply and avoid the diversion issue. I was wondering about, now I've forgotten, but anyhow, I'll go to my third question, which is where, this is probably more appropriate for town council, it's where in the process should this either endorsement or non-opposition letter be submitted? Is it necessary for it to be submitted right up front very early in the process? Because I know the state only started on June 29th to accept applications, so, and obviously the state is nowhere near completing the exhaustive review that I gather. We only got the regs this afternoon, and I sort of skimmed them, but I gather there's an exhaustive kind of review of the people involved in the operation to make sure they're not criminals and all that other stuff. But I didn't know where in the process we have to submit our, whatever our local non-opposition.
It's in the third phase of the application process. So we've just submitted the first phase, and that's the initial review. They want to make sure that you have adequate funds to support a dispensary, and they want to know who the board of directors are and who's going to be contributing what. The second phase is the actual application questionnaire portion, where you have to write short essays answering certain questions and showing a certain financial amount that you're going to be contributing to the dispensary operation. And in the third phase is when you have to commit to a site and to get the letters of approval or non-opposition. We would prefer to get those letters earlier on in the process so that we have everything sort of settled and we can just move very quickly as soon as we get approval for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, so we can get up and running, because it's been 2 years since the voters of Massachusetts voted for medical marijuana, and thus far there's only one dispensary that's open. And in Acton, 63% of the residents voted in favor of medical marijuana. So I think this is a good location because we're near Route 495 and Route 2, and Acton is a very progressive town, and they understand what it means to be able to offer medical marijuana to patients. And so for all these reasons, this is an ideal location. And so we would like to get those letters sooner rather than later, but obviously you're going to want to consult and have some meetings and maybe let the town speak, their minds and give their opinions.
Did you have anything to add, or?
No, the only clarification I was going to make is that there is this somewhat peculiar circumstance where I believe the letter is required in order for their application to be complete. However, there's no obligation for the town to provide that letter. There's some tension between the Attorney General's regulations that was spoken to with respect to zoning. There cannot be any zoning prohibition put in place to, for instance, have an outright ban or a moratorium on any dispensaries. however, the DPH's requirement of this letter of non-opposition or approval requires them to have it, but there's no requirement for the town to provide it. It leaves a somewhat peculiar circumstance, and I think the applicants, like the town, everyone is going through this process for the first time and really trying to figure out how to navigate it. I think that's fair to say.
Yes, that's exactly it.
I think you answered another question that the one that I've forgotten was why Acton? Is it because of the progressive, we're not Cambridge, you know. We're not the People's Republic, but yeah.
Cambridge is very conservative
but the
on
location,
this. Yeah.
I guess, is it?
Location is ideal because of Route 2 and 495. But Acton is far more progressive than a lot of other towns. I think there are some cities that they're concerned because they're not entirely sure where to put these dispensaries. The initial regulations stated that if the towns don't establish their own boundaries and their own rules, then it reverts back to the state, where the state says it should not be within 500 feet of a school or a church. But every town can change that, and obviously it's problematic. So towns like Brookline have completely abandoned the recommendations of DPH, and they've stated, well, yes, it can be next to a synagogue or a church, it just can't be in the same facility as a daycare center. And it can't be in the same facility as a school, because you wouldn't be able to open a dispensary in Brookline otherwise. There are synagogues and churches and schools everywhere on every corner. So every town needs to come up with their own zoning rules that they feel comfortable with. And we've spoken to the planning board, and they seem fairly open about where we would be able to zone both a cultivation site and a dispensary. And that's pretty unusual for towns, I'll say that. So yes, you are progressive.
So 2 more questions.
Yeah, sure.
I know my colleagues have, but are you looking in other towns or considering other towns?
Sure,
just hedging your bets, I guess.
We are looking in other towns. Our first choice is Acton, but obviously we need to look in other towns. If we don't get the letter of approval or a letter of non-opposition, we need to cover ourselves and see if we can find another location.
And then the last question is, when you say you provide delivery, is it private, or do you use the postal service?
No, yeah, it's illegal to use the postal service. So according to the state regulations, a delivery vehicle has to have 2 registered dispensary agents at all times within the vehicle. The vehicle has GPS tracking, video cameras, and panic buttons. And so the vehicles are tracked and recorded. There are electronic signatures and thumbprints that are taken upon arrival. The patients or the caregivers have to present their dispensary registration cards and a picture ID to verify they are who they are, and then the transaction can take place. So it's a pretty secured system. It's far more secure than my mobile practice, and I do carry controlled drugs with me. So,
okay, well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Singer Franny? Yeah. Microphone.
I want to be clear. If we don't either say we approve or we don't oppose, you can't go forward. They can't go forward.
Correct.
It's very confusing to me, having talked to, I was thinking it was a feel-good thing. It made sense for people who need it. I spoke to somebody from the LA area, and they're having a lot of trouble with crime. And she's a council person in one of the cities in the LA area, and they opposed it in their town. And I had always thought that I wouldn't be in favor of that, but LA is having a big trouble because they have to have guns in their store to protect themselves because they have to have a lot of cash on hand because of federal law.
Yeah, Many dispensaries don't have armed security personnel, and in fact, I don't believe that DPH here in Massachusetts wants armed security guards. The actual statistics show that throughout California, the state of Washington, and Colorado, crime rates have actually gone down around dispensary sites because of the heightened security that exists at the dispensaries. So all the dispensaries have to have live recording video cameras, and they have to have appropriate lighting. And for those reasons alone, people are less likely to try to break into a dispensary. Plus, it's very difficult to get into a dispensary with all the enhanced security. So the actual statistics, I know a lot of people are initially fearful, but the actual statistics show that crime goes down around dispensaries. And I just today read an article in Washington State. They just, they legalized recreational marijuana. This past year, they expected crime to go up, and it did not. They expected there'd be more crime because of the legalization of recreational marijuana. And they generated $44 million in tax revenue. So now the question is, what are they gonna do with all that revenue? Because they thought they'd have to put it towards enhanced security, hiring more police officials. But they found that they don't need that at all. And the police can actually get back to patrolling areas where there are, more crime rate issues. So the actual statistics show just the opposite. I have seen on TV that there are some dispensaries that hire, they're kind of like the Brinks armored trucks to transport money or medical marijuana, but most dispensaries don't do that. That's just not how most of them operate. The big concern is the cash. And if you release the cash and transport it frequently, you're less likely to suffer the consequences if you're holding onto large sums of cash within the dispensary. So
it sounded to me that it isn't really convincing that there's not crime right around there if there's all this added security. I have concerns about being the groundbreaker in this. Without seeing what's happening in towns that do have them.
I'm happy to forward the articles. There have been several studies done to show that crime actually decreases. And in fact, in Denver, property values have increased, and they attribute that in part to having recreational marijuana within the city. But the crime rates consistently have either stayed the same or have gone down around dispensaries because of the security. And I'm not just talking about like a little dinky camera here and there. These are enhanced security systems. These are like federal and municipal level security systems that have to be installed. There have to be fingerprint scanners and live video recording that uploads onto the cloud. There's a lot of security features that you would not see in a pharmacy. And the bottom line is that the takeaway from this is that this is actually a pharmacy. This is a pharmacy that grows and compounds its medicine. And it's no different than a CVS or a Walgreens in terms of providing medicine. However, you cannot enter the dispensary without that card and without an appointment. And that goes for all of the dispensaries. You can't have somebody just roaming around and stroll in. They will not be allowed to enter the premises if they do not have their registration card, they don't have their picture ID, and they do not have an appointment.
It sounded like there was people were easily getting prescriptions, and the people who were really sick weren't as many of the people who were getting it as were people who were wanting to use it recreationally and had easily gotten it. And they were having trouble with the fact that you can't be arrested for or easily identified as driving high as you can driving drunk. And there were enough red flags that I feel a little bit concerned about being sort of breaking ground. I'll continue to
Did you want me to address those concerns?
I also, because we don't have a big crime rate as it is. So for crime, I mean, of that kind, of breaking into stores or holding up people for cash, or, I mean, so for it to go down, I mean, it would have to be a threat of going up for it to go down. I don't know, I would want,
Just to clarify, I don't think
Yeah.
she's saying that our crime rate's going to go down, but that the statistics in areas that have dispensaries in other states already, that the crime rate in those areas have gone down. I don't think she's making promises that our crime rate's going to decrease.
Yeah, I guess not. I just was hoping that we could combine a medical establishment with dispensing marijuana. I mean, that's what makes sense to me.
Sure, it makes sense to a lot of people. Unfortunately,
places.
they won't. You know, the hospitals have been approached by different dispensary applicants. Hospitals do not want to be affiliated with medical marijuana because of the AMA's current stand on it, and until it's taken off the Schedule I list of drugs, that they don't want to handle it because of all the federal regulations. A Schedule I narcotic means that it's a narcotic that has absolutely no medicinal value, and the research obviously shows that medical marijuana does have medicinal value. But I did want to get back to your concern about doctors writing prescriptions haphazardly. The regulations in Massachusetts are far more stringent. They're actually the most stringent in the United States. They are requiring physicians to undergo many hours of continuing education. They have to be certified by DPH. They're going to undergo training so that they're able to determine who's trying to use it recreationally and who's trying to obtain medical marijuana for medicinal purposes, because there are people that do have a legitimate need for this medication. So I know someone who does have a Massachusetts medical marijuana card. He went to see a physician who is registered. He was there for more than an hour answering questions and providing medical documentation. And he was then able to receive his card after the physician reviewed the medical notes that he received and after he did his exam. So I know in California, there are obviously physicians that are just handing them out like candy. I don't think that that can happen here in Massachusetts because of the strict regulations in terms of what's required by the physicians. And if you take time to read the regulations, I think you'll see that. They're pretty stringent.
This is new for me, feeling this way, because I had felt, because I know it is important for many people, that it wasn't right for towns to say, not here, because it is important, but I do have these concerns.
I understand. I think everybody has concerns. This is new to everyone, and it needs to start somewhere. And we're hoping we find a town that's brave enough to say, yeah, we're willing to try and see if we can help these patients. And remember, it's not just going to be within Acton, it's going to be your neighbors, the surrounding towns, where people are going to require some of this medication. And as far as the people driving under the influence, a lot of these patients are people who can't drive. They're not going to be driving anyway. So many of them will have caregivers, patient caregivers, who will be getting the medicine for them because they can't drive. And there's a very good Sanjay Gupta segment, I don't know if you've seen it, on CNN. He had a 3-part series about medical marijuana. He used to be strongly opposed to it, and after seeing the research and reading more into it and the crime statistics and statistics on operating under the influence, he's now been convinced that it has a definite role in society in terms of treating people with different medical ailments. And if you watch his first segment, the research shows that people who are habitual users, people who use it every day or several times a day, their driving is not impaired. It's people that use it intermittently that tend to have impairment problems. But I'm happy to send a link to Mr. Ledoux if you want to see the first segment. It discusses Dravet syndrome, which is a pretty horrific disease in children where they have unremitting seizures of more than 100 a day. And medical cannabis is the only medication that stops the seizures, the only one. The narcotics, phenobarbital, nothing touches it. The only medication that touches it is medical cannabis.
Didn't they make that into a pill version?
A liquid, a tincture. It's called Charlotte's Web. It's a high CBD plant. CBD is the active ingredient that does not make you high. It's an anti-inflammatory and anti-seizure compound. And you can grow plants that are high in either CBD or high in THC. The THC is the psychoactive component of medical cannabis. Many of our plants are going to be high CBD plants because we're going to be treating things like multiple sclerosis, muscular spasticity, Dravet syndrome, seizure disorders, Parkinson's disease. So they have to be high CBD plants. We have a chemist, someone who's a PhD in chemistry, who's going to be extracting the CBD and compounding it into a form that's uniform. Part of the problem with a lot of dispensaries is that they grow these high CBD plants and then they don't know how to compound it or process it, so they're just giving it to the parents of these kids with Dravet syndrome, and they don't know how to prepare it. So there's no uniformity, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But if you can provide it in a form of medicine, in a suppository or a tincture, a drop, it's just a drop that goes under the tongue. If you can provide a uniformity in a product that's been tested, everything has to be tested through an independent lab and our own lab. We're going to have our own lab in-house, so that we can provide a consistent medication for whatever ailment these people are seeking treatment for.
Okay, I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
You had mentioned the security for the delivery vehicles. Can you just speak about the specific security that you'll have for your on-site facilities, both the growing and the store?
Sure.
They're separate?
I should probably have Olaf explain. He's the expert in security. That's his forte.
Well, it will be a secure, locked facility for the cultivation, and so no one except for an RMD agent can access that area. Local officials, they are allowed to come in if, for example, the police, they're allowed to come on official business, but otherwise no one can come into the cultivation area. In terms of the dispensing area, you need to have both the patient ID and the official ID, driver license, to actually enter the facility. We will have cameras recording 24/7 in all areas. No windows on the cultivation facility, for example. No one can look inside.
There's no signage also.
Yeah.
There's no signage, so we're not permitted to have, the little green cross logo or something that says cannabis or marijuana. There can't be any indication from the outside that what you have inside is medical cannabis.
But can your shop have a sign? I mean, how would people know?
It would say Mass Wellspring.
Got it. Okay. You can't have like a marijuana
right,
leaf.
And right. But you can't have like a big marijuana leaf and things like that. And it's the same thing with the vehicle. The vehicle can have no signage on the outside, and it has to have 2 dispensary agents at all times. They also have to have access to phones so they can contact officials, or they can contact the dispensary if there's a problem. So if there's a breakdown in the vehicle and they need to get someone out there quickly, they'll each have their own form of contact. There's a panic button in the vehicle. There's video recording and, like I said, GPS tracking. So we know exactly where they are at all times, and they have to get electronic signatures at each location when they stop, recording the time that they stop, the time they're there, and the time they come back. It's the same thing within the dispensary. There have to be 2 agents at all times in each room where you're handling medical marijuana. You have to weigh it at each stage so that we know exactly what plant number has what weight, so that there's no diversion. And there have to be electronic signatures so we know exactly who handled the marijuana at what time. All the agents will be wearing pocketless uniforms so they can't tuck in marijuana to take it out. But again, everything is going to be weighed, even waste. When you have waste, every little bit has to be weighed. When people return medical marijuana to the dispensary, if they're no longer using it, that has to be weighed and recorded and sent to the Department of Health. All of this information has to be given to the Department of Health. So every little bit is recorded, and we know exactly who's touched it at what time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you said that you're looking at probably 5,000 square feet for cultivation. Approximately how many plants is that?
Yeah, it's initially 5,000. You know more about the plants.
Yeah, we'll probably start with maybe 100 plants, and then gradually go up.
That's not many. Okay, and then you had mentioned something about administering, I think maybe you're speaking about your veterinary practice now, but administering, drugs or controlled narcotics to patients. Would you be, when you're delivering, administering this to people? Okay, they have to do it on their own.
But we will be training them. So, for instance, many people have never used a suppository, and it's kind of strange thing for them to even contemplate doing, but there's a proper method of doing it and a sanitary method. And so we would have someone explain that to them, how to administer it, how to administer the tinctures under the tongue and how many they need, how to vaporize. Vaporizers are a little bit complex for some people. Vaporization is a safer form of inhaling the medicine. When you smoke it, there's the potential for carcinogens to accumulate in your lung tissue. With vaporization, you don't have any of those carcinogen accumulation problems. So we would have people training the patients and the caregivers on how to administer the medication.
Great. Okay, before I open it up to the public, I believe Deputy Chief Burrows is here. I'm wondering if you just come up and speak about any concerns or thoughts from the police side. Sure.
Good evening. I placed a call today to Salem, Massachusetts Police Chief Mary Butler. Their dispensary has been open for 1 week, so unfortunately she doesn't have a lot of data to provide. Their dispensary is in Salem, their cultivation is in Amesbury, so she's only dealing with the dispensary side. She said the group that came in to do the dispensary was very good. They were very upfront, very open. They discussed security plans. They get a tour of the facility. In the DPH rules under the CMR, the 24-hour cameras have to cover every place that marijuana is touched, processed, dispensed, covers the outside of the buildings, entryways, exitways, parking lot. The DPH regulations are actually pretty intensive in terms of security. And same thing with the delivery vehicles in terms of they have to have GPS, they have to have a direct route, they have to change routes, randomize the routes, they have to randomize the time of the delivery so they're not delivering to the same place at the same time. They have to notify immediately the local police department of any violation, any loss of product, an accident, and they have to notify the Department of Public Health within 24 hours. So it's pretty well laid out in terms of the CMRs. Currently, Salem has limited their foot traffic in the dispensary. It is by appointment only currently. So they're not taking random people off the street with their cards. They have to make an appointment, but they have to show their cards and their ID to get in. And those are some of the notes I took from speaking to her today and looking over the CMRs. So without a lot of history in Massachusetts, not much to go by in terms of what's happened so far, but looking at the regulations, I'm hopeful that it'd be a fairly secure operation.
Great.
If they follow the rules according to the CMRs.
Okay, thank you. Franny, you said you had another question.
Wondering, have you been in this business before?
I have not. I've handled controlled drugs, as I've said, for 20 years. My cousin, who lives in Arizona, and my uncle have been in this business for a number of years. They currently own a hydroponics, mail-order hydroponics business for dispensaries. They're also consultants to dispensaries on how to set up optimal grow operations that are organic. My cousin Nathan has worked in dispensaries. He's worked in delivery of medical marijuana in California. He worked in a dispensary in San Francisco. He was actually a manager of a dispensary there. So he's one of the board members and one of our executive members that will be helping us with the dispensary. So he'll be working there as well.
It doesn't affect us. I mean, if we approve this one, we can have several others come along, and we have to each time approve them. And by saying we won't oppose, does that, I mean, the community I spoke to actually voted to not have dispensaries. Does that mean we cannot do that in the future?
I don't think I understand the question.
Well, maybe it's not allowed in the state right now, but in California, the person I was speaking to, who is a council person in a big city around there, they decided not to have, they voted to ban all dispensaries because
So Acton cannot ban dispensaries, if that's your question.
Because of state law, or once we?
Correct, because of state law.
Oh, okay, okay.
So as a matter of land use and zoning, the Attorney General has said that cities and towns cannot outright ban medical marijuana dispensaries because that would be contrary to the state law allowing medical marijuana in the state.
I really want this to work. I'm trying to really be cautious about it. That's why.
Okay, I'd like to take if there are any questions or comments from the audience. No? No? Yes? Okay.
We're looking at...
sorry, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, right, sorry.
Thank you.
Barry Rosen. We're looking at possibility, I shouldn't say probability, of special town meeting to look at a few things. What if this could be one of the topics at the special town meeting so we get a sense what the rest of our residents think?
I just have one other quick question that came up from the chief's comment. Is it not required under the CMR that you have an appointment, and that's not required under the CMR, that you have an appointment to visit a dispensary?
No.
So, but your business plan would require an appointment. You wouldn't just allow somebody come off the street to...
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes, you do. You have to, I believe you do have to, do you have to, you know, okay. He's the expert in the regulation.
No, you don't need to have that rule in place, but we will enforce that initially. Then we will see what happens down the road, but we will initially have appointments only, just like in Salem.
You do have to be registered with that dispensary. You can't just go from one dispensary to another to another.
Okay.
The registration goes straight to the DPH database. So when a patient comes in, DPH is notified that they've come in, they've purchased the set amount that they're allowed under law, and that they're not jumping to another dispensary. It's very highly regulated. I think if you read the regulations, your fears about diversion and security, that's all going to be allayed because they really spell it out very thoroughly. And there's been only one dispensary open. DPH is really making sure that everybody is following the security features that are outlined within the regulations. So they're not just passing people through, you know, oh yeah, you'll get your security system up and running down the road. It has to all be in play before you get your final license to dispense medical marijuana or even grow it. Any other questions?
Additional questions? Okay, do people have thoughts, concerns? I mean, I'll say, you know, frankly, I appreciate, you know, not wanting to be the first, although I think, again, you know, I've said in the past, Acton's the first on a lot of things, and, you know, I think there is public support for medical marijuana in this town, as evidenced by the vote that was taken a few years ago, and I appreciate the efforts you guys have put in already to meet with the town manager and the planning department and others. You know, I think you're taking an open approach to this, and so frankly, I don't have concerns and would be fine sending a letter of support or of non-opposition. So I don't know how others feel. Janet.
Yeah, I actually, before I really heard the responses, explaining why this letter and where it's, you know, because we didn't really know anything about, but I figured that the applicants would be providing us with information about what was proposed, and I think that Deputy Chief Burrows helped by kind of quickly summarizing some of the stringent regulations as well. I think that I'm more comfortable with doing a non-opposition than you know, sort of a wide-armed support. You know, I am inherently more reserved and sort of careful, maybe cautious, but I think that it's so heavily regulated. It's just, and you're talking about, this is not just big yard full of plants, and you know, dishing them out, rolling them up in joints and handing them out to people and all that sort of thing. I think it's, you're talking about compounding, you're talking about developing different treatments depending on people's maladies and tailoring the usage of the active ingredient to whatever the malady is that you want to address. So that gives me, I'm backing away from this microphone because it's echoing. And so that gives me, a greater level of comfort. I do think that this is a much more cautious step than what other states have done, which is sort of a free-for-all and has given rise to some concerns, say, where there are products, food products that contain marijuana that get into the hands of children who, or even people who are inexperienced with marijuana and just assume it's just a nice piece of chocolate and then go wacko for several hours. So, it's sort of bold and daring being the first, but I think that the public voted. I was honestly surprised by the vote, the state vote, but I'm willing to, I think I'm comfortable with doing a non-opposition because that's basically legally what we're required to do or not to do, which is, anyhow, we're required to not oppose, and so in submitting a written statement, we're basically stating what we are prepared to do.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's been 2 years since the law was first passed. I'm not sure that we would be the groundbreakers. Salem is opened. I think there are other applicants who are still in the pipeline from Deval Patrick's administration who will be approved as time goes on. Governor Baker sounds like he's trying to expedite the approval process. I don't think there has been any movement in town that I'm aware of I don't know if we can do a moratorium while we draft the zoning bylaw and try to restrict areas of town where these facilities might open or whatever. I'm not aware of any movement of that in town. I think we need to adhere to the law. I agree with Janet that a letter of non-opposition I'd be much more comfortable with than a letter of support. It seemed like a fine group of individuals, but understandably without any experience in operating a business in Massachusetts of this nature, since they haven't been allowed to do it. I'm comfortable with approving a letter of non-opposition and leaving it up to the State Department of Public Health to do the appropriate background checks and make sure they meet all those strict requirements of the state regulations.
Thank you.
I support full legalization of marijuana, so I'm sure you can guess where I stand on your proposal. But as far as asking town, I'm also okay with putting it on a warrant item and non-binding resolution at town meeting, because I do feel like this is something people should be able to, the general populace should be able to offer their opinion on, so.
I also feel medical locations or full legalization would be a better route for the whole state. I do worry a little bit about other drugs and crime and things, but I do also agree about it. It was passed, and I don't believe in voting for something. I voted for it, and I don't believe in saying not in my backyard, but I do have concerns. But
we just want you to know we are very sensitive to the concerns that towns would have, and part of my approaching you is that I would want to let you know that we do want to have a very positive working relationship with the town of Acton. And of course, we're not going to try to open up in a location where our neighbors don't want us, where we want to be welcomed by our neighbors, and we're not going to be antagonistic about opening up in certain areas over other areas. We do want to have a very positive working relationship, and that's really what we're seeking, a town that is more, not exactly a partnership, but a town that won't obstruct, and a town that we can work with and talk to if there are issues of concern that you feel like you can approach us. We're approachable, and that we feel like we can approach you if we have any concerns about anything. Okay.
And I just want to be clear for everybody, this isn't the end of the process. It's not like we would say, you know, letter of no opposition or support, and then they open this tomorrow. There's, you know, as you mentioned, a number of steps for getting approved through the state, and then actually building something here would potentially require permits as well. So this isn't the end of these discussions either. So does anybody want to make a motion? See everybody running to their microphones.
I'll move that the board approve a letter of non-opposition to be submitted with Mass Wellspring Incorporated's application to open a medical marijuana cultivation and distribution facility in Acton.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Did you say aye to yes or to no? Okay, so that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Have a good evening.
Okay. All right, we will move on to our 8 o'clock hearing, and thank you for bearing with us. And why don't we just do these both together, the same, yep, 8 and 8:05 for 7th Settlement South. So would you guys mind coming up and introducing yourselves and both of these requests?
Thank you, Cheryl Gould, attorney for 7th Settlement South, and this is Peter Henry, one of the managers of the LLC. We were here before you on the approval of the all-alcoholic beverage license, and when it went to the ABCC, it was brought to our attention by the investigator that we didn't have in the advertisement or in the Form 43 that the town sends a request for the pledge of the license, which is serving as security for our debt, and also the alteration of the premises. We did have it in the application before you, and it's in the narrative, but it wasn't on the cover sheet. And so I thought it a better part of discretion to re-advertise so that the public knew that we were going to come back and ask for both the pledge of the license and the alteration of premises. And so it's really just a housekeeping matter that we're here for today to ask you to approve that. The other was the common victualer's license, and again, they're going to be serving food, so this is just a simple request to allow them a common victualer's license in addition to the alcohol beverage license.
Great. Are there any questions?
This is, okay.
So we had approved this prior, the all alcohol license, but there was some mistake with the posting of it. So this is just sort of cleaning that up and then also doing the common victualer's license.
Oh, okay. Doesn't have anything to do with the alteration of the premises, which I thought you mentioned, but.
The license was already granted to the 537 Mass Ave LLC.
Right.
And our initial request was to transfer that license to 7th Settlement South and to allow them to alter the premises. But we didn't put in the advertisement that we were asking for an alteration of the premises. It was in the application, and it is at the ABCC.
Okay.
And when he saw it, he said, "Did you advertise for alteration? Did you advertise for the pledge?" And I said, "No, but the hearing minutes will reflect that we spoke of it." And he said, "It would just be..."
I wasn't aware we even had to approve an alteration. I thought that was the building department, so.
I agree. I might have gotten a picayune investigator.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, then does somebody want to make a motion? I think you can do a combined one for both of these.
Can we do both?
Yeah.
I guess I move to approve. I guess it's the first thing is sort of weird. It's an application. What is this? For the liquor license with an acknowledgement that the application includes a pledge of license and an alteration of licensed premises. And move to approve the common victualer's license. Can we do it all in one fell swoop?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for hanging around. All right, up next we have a request for waiver of fees for Acton Wine and Spirits. I don't know if anybody from Acton Wine and Spirits is here tonight. Okay. Steve, do you want to speak about this briefly?
I mean, Steve, we have the memo from the Board of Health. We have the memo from Acton
Right.
Wine and Spirits. So my question to you is this our jurisdiction, or
Right,
doesn't the
because
Board of Health
it's
set these fees?
Well,
They should have the authority to waive them, I would think.
We set a couple years ago a uniform fee-setting policy, and this was one of the fees we set. I mean, we approve all the Board of Health fees as the Board of Selectmen. So I think as the Board of Health memo indicated, you know, this is a measuring device. You've got to make sure that the proper change, et cetera, is being returned when somebody brings recyclables in there. All other stores, et cetera, that have this do pay this fee. So I think it's their recommendation that we did not waive it, and I concur.
My only question is why the owner of the business was not aware of the fee, because obviously from the memorandum it seems like he's paid it before, and so I was just curious as far as that.
I don't think we can answer why
Can't
he's
answer
paid
that.
it, but
Yeah,
doesn't
well, obviously
know
he's not
why,
here, so
right?
I would just like to state for the record that was my question, and I was curious as far as how that happened.
He claims he wasn't aware.
He claims he was unaware.
I mean,
right,
I honestly, I think that we set the fees. They're supposed to account for certain costs of doing the inspections. And honestly, if we waive this fee because this person objects, I think we're opening up Pandora's box with other people complaining, well, if that operation can get fees waived, why not us? And I think it's a matter of fairness. You know, we need to be pretty even-handed in enforcing our own fees. And obviously if we get enough feedback from enough people that they're really out of line with what our own determination of our costs is that we need to cover with these fees, then we can revisit it. But I think they are what they are. Honestly, especially this person's been in business for a very long time, or long enough to have undergone inspection before and who have paid the fees in the past. I think we can presume that somebody has some knowledge of the things that are going to happen in the course of business, including this sort of thing. So I think we should, well, I agree with the health director that we shouldn't waive.
Sure, Randy?
I'm wondering if maybe it was just the wording. It was just a semantics thing, getting an invoice for something. He thought it was sort of being charged for the service or something. But maybe once it was described that this is the usual fee, it's sort of different. You don't usually get an invoice for a fee. Or maybe you do. I don't know.
I think you do. Yeah, you get a bill for the fee.
And it's called an invoice. I was just wondering if maybe...
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so does anybody want to make a motion to either waive the fee or deny the waiver of the fee?
Move to deny the waiver of the fee for Acton Wine and Spirit.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. Next up, board to consider a special town meeting. Would you like to introduce this one, Steve?
And town council is here to back me up.
In case you say anything wrong.
Over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've been involved with a litigation on the next generation child care center. In the process of kind of winding down that litigation, we have entered into negotiations with Walker Realty that results in a tentative agreement for the town to purchase the next generation site for $1.8 million. And part of the stipulation from Walker Realty would be that we hold a summer town meeting, and that if we do purchase, we would allow the Kennedy Landscaping to remain in business for the rest of their business year this year. And so we just had an executive session with the board. They concurred with moving forward to a special town meeting to ask the town to purchase the next generation site. We've consulted with the town clerk, the availability of the high school, the availability of the moderator, and would recommend a special town meeting date of August 4th, which is a Tuesday night at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. After that fact, we kind of lose the audio-visual person at the high school as he is getting married and going on a honeymoon. So that seemed to be the most expeditious time. Would be the August 4th date. My recommendation would be that the board, if the board is so inclined to call this town meeting this evening, that we open and close the warrant tonight, so we just have a one-article town meeting. As you know, we have a November 10th special town meeting that will deal with a variety of things, such as zoning at Kelly's Corner, potentially petitioning the legislature to increase the number of our liquor licenses, kind of tied to Kelly's Corner and things like that. So that is what we've discussed, and that would be my recommendation, to call the town meeting for August 4th at 7 p.m. at the Acton-Boxborough High School Auditorium.
Okay, any questions? I know we just talked about this a couple hours
and
ago.
Open and close the warrant.
Yeah, I mean, my question would be about the language of the article and the motion. We talked about an appraisal for $1.25 million, and the $1.8 million, including the settlement of the lawsuit. I mean, would the deed actually say $1.8 million for the purchase of the property, or how do we explain to town meeting that the $1.8 million is not just, it's not in the wording of this motion, is not just to purchase the property, it includes $600,000 to settle the ongoing litigation and avoid future costs of that?
We would typically include that description in the summary, which has not been drafted yet. Tonight, I believe you're just approving the verbiage of the article itself, but the summary will fully describe the fact that this transaction, it's only the land transaction that requires town meeting approval, so that's the only thing that's included in the article in the motion language. The summary will give a more thorough explication to town meeting of how that number was arrived at.
So that the motion says acquire the property for $1.8 million. So that would be what the deed would say. We borrowed the property for $1.8 million, and there would be settlement to the litigation that wouldn't include any numbers. It would just be settlement.
Correct. That's how things have been discussed and envisioned so far.
Okay.
And I had one quick question, because it says, oh no, I see, okay. May
So
determine appropriate and transfer from free cash. I just wasn't sure because it said free
Yeah,
cash.
the motion and the summary are not finalized yet, so that would be stabilization fund as opposed to free cash. It is just, again, just the article language that
we care about.
We're focused on tonight.
Okay. Are there any, oh, Jen? Nope. Well, I want to see if there
I mean, it's just a question. So we're not voting on this actual language tonight. We're just opening and closing the warrant, and we'll vote on the warrant language at some future meeting.
Well, we have to post the warrant 2 weeks before the town meeting, which is, got the calendar. Warrant has to be posted by, it'll be the day after our next meeting. The warrant would have to be posted.
So we would approve the actual language at the next meeting.
Right.
Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Okay. Just focus on them. All right, now, motion, Janet.
I moved.
Oh, okay.
What happens if we don't approve it at town meeting? Do we go back into litigation?
Nita, you want to handle that?
Yeah, so this settlement of the litigation is contingent on the town acquiring the property. If the town does not acquire the property because it is not approved by town meeting, then the litigation would continue.
Okay, I move to approve the proposed special town meeting on August 4th, starting at 7 o'clock at the high school auditorium, with the one warrant article to be related to the proposed acquisition of the Walker Realty property, and with the warrant to be closed with only that one article.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, excellent. So update on Acton Leadership Group. I think some of you were there. When did we meet? Back of my notes here. June 18th, I think, is when we met. Does that sound right? Yeah. And we talked about having a 3 boards meeting with the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, and the school committee, similar to what we did last year. And so I had just said we would bring it back to this board to discuss. There were a couple ideas around what would be discussed at that meeting. So the schools had, the school committee had suggested that they are interested in potentially doing sort of a school financing 101, but with that, they had suggested having a almost super meeting with 5 boards. So it would be our board, the Acton Finance Committee, the Boxborough Board of Selectmen, the Boxborough Finance Committee, and the entire Acton Boxborough School Committee. Or we could potentially have just a 3 boards meeting with the whole school committee and then the Acton Selectmen and Finance Committees. The agenda for that would be determined, and we had discussed having the chair of the 3 boards discuss that and bring a proposal back to ALG. So I just wanted to get, we wanted to get a general sense from folks on this board about whether or not they were interested in having another 3 boards meeting and what perhaps you would want to see on an agenda for a 3 boards meeting. So I don't know if people have particular thoughts. Franny?
Well, just one specific, I definitely think we should include both towns, the FinComs and boards of selectmen. And I also would want to include, if we were meeting all together, I want to definitely talk about transportation, because they just voted on that issue, and it's limiting people's afternoon trips to businesses in the future. So I would absolutely want to include that on a discussion. I also like the idea of the sort of the get to know the process.
Okay, I think if we were to do this I wrote 5 towns, that would be horrible, 5 boards meeting, that it probably, I think that the school thing would end up taking all night. So to be honest, I think it's sort of if we do it with everybody, it would be focused on school financing, which I have some concerns about. I also have concerns about having all 5 boards there, because for everybody who was at the 3 boards meeting last year, that was quite large, and I'm not sure how productive having all 5 boards present in one room really will be in discussing any ideas. But so just so you know, I'm not, I think we should definitely mention, I can mention that, discussing transportation. I'm not sure how it would work with 5 boards. Are you interested in doing that with just the 3? Or was that something you wanted to do?
I just want to see it happen. Actually, if it's just to focus on school financing, again, I think it would be useful to include both towns, but I want to see that conversation happen. It doesn't have to be at the 5 board meeting.
Okay. Other thoughts, Janet?
I would be interested in having a 3 boards meeting. I would like to focus on Acton. I remember the 3 boards meeting we had, pretty large group. I think that if the planners can have another approach to the discussion so that it's a little more focused and on real issues as opposed to, I just recall that people were saying things that I just thought, well, some of the people really need to get up to speed on what the committees are really focusing on most of the year. I think that it was better the time before we had a 3 boards meeting, and we actually had some hypothetical issues that, including, I think, OPEB or something. It was something that we had to break into groups to discuss, and then come together as a big circle to talk about what we had come up with. And I thought that allowed us to grapple with some of the sorts of issues that the 3 boards actually really deal with. I thought it was more productive. I think that last year's I think it was more an opportunity to just hear people speak whom we didn't necessarily have a chance to speak unless we happen to be liaisons, so you hear the school committee people, but I wasn't convinced that to me, it wasn't as beneficial as I thought the prior 3 boards meeting had been. I think that I do remember we had a slide presentation, and that was, well, of course, it was Mr. Noon talking about how we're going to run out of money, and you know, I think that those are things that's the sort of thing that I think 3 boards meeting is useful for, to talk about real issues like that. What are you going to do come 2017 or whatever if the reserves are down, they haven't been replenished, you know, and it's sort of, what do you want to do? Do you want to go for an override, or do you want to try to cut stuff from the budgets or something like that? The hard questions that maybe people don't really want to face. And I think that that's the concern of a number of people on FinCom, is they want people to be thinking about that, because we have managed to avoid an override, and maybe we'll continue to manage to avoid an override. But you know, anyhow, I would like maybe whoever is organizing it, you're probably going to be involved, to sort of think about having some real town committee issues for us to sort of sink our teeth into. So,
Peter, I mean, you're at the table, so you know, you're at ALG, and any additional thoughts on what kind of meeting you want to see? 20 boards meeting?
I'm in favor of the 3 boards meeting. Again, you know, we'll leave it up to the 3 chairs to come up with a proposed agenda. I want to hear more about the school's proposal to present their, you know, budgeting process and how that would add to the meeting. But other than that, I'm in favor of it. Don't having a meeting.
Okay.
Not having attended the last meeting, I don't have any real suggestions as far as structure or anything like that is concerned. But I do think that the school finances do need to be looked at, and would like to hear that discussion and to be a part of that. So.
Okay, and just to clarify again, and this was part of my concern, I think my understanding from the proposal from the school committee so far is not really to have a discussion of their budget, but really for them to do more education about, I think, almost what they end up doing a lot on their budget Saturday, but theirs happens to be later in the process. And I think my concern is really, you know, if they want to do that, I think they can come before our board and the FinCom and do that at any time. And, you know, I mean, we offered, the town finance departments do a sort of municipal finance 101 for new board members coming onto our board and coming onto the FinCom. And so I think if that's what they're getting at, that's something they could certainly offer for selectmen and finance committee members, but I'm not sure the usefulness of doing it in front of all the 3 boards. And I want to be careful about prioritizing school financing over municipal financing, because I think we get into that a lot, and it's, you know, it's not, the schools are not the only ones with financial issues that they are trying to deal with, but they've just happened to have dealt with it by having bigger budget increases than we have, you know, so that's, anyways, I have some feelings around that. But Steve, you wanted to add?
Well, just, you know, it just seems to me that one thing that was lacking, and you know, and this Wednesday's a good example, we're going to be doing our goal setting. We're going to identify our short and long-term goals. It would seem to me this type of forum, both the town and the schools should identify the goals and the concerns they're working on, because everything is, you know, we're all going to have to work out a budget. We're all going to want to try to accomplish our goals, but we need to know what they are first on both sides, it would seem to me.
I like that. Okay. Okay, so I mean, we just want to get a general sense and take it back to the next ALG and then chat with people, but I appreciate the varied feedback. Excellent. Okay, consent agenda. So please, I will read through all of these. Please say hold, if anybody in the audience also wants to hold anything, just yell hold.
Katie?
Yep. Oh,
before we start, are Alan and Nancy going to be added to this consent agenda? I emailed.
Yeah, I think...
I was like, I have no idea about that.
I think we can do it under the guise that we didn't expect to do it, or we should have done it. So we can add that tonight. And Lisa and I had talked about it this afternoon. So we either could do it tonight or we could do it Wednesday, but might as well do it tonight.
Okay.
And what are we adding? Sorry, just so
So we're adding the reappointments of Nancy Dinkle and Alan Gulliver to the EDC.
Oh, okay, so we're actually just going to do that as adding reappointments for everybody? Are they part of the, yeah, we're doing the reappointments for all boards.
Oh, I see,
But I'm
okay.
not going to do that as part of the consent agenda, I'm just going to do that separately.
Okay.
Just because it wasn't on the actual agenda. Okay, so I will read through all the consent agenda items, and if you have any that you would like to hold, please yell hold. Number 8, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Mike Miller, Nara Park, July 18th. Number 9, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Optometrics Corporation, Nara Park, August 6th.
Hold.
Thank you. Number 10, license to sell Aeronap Cellars, Acton Boxborough Farmers Market. Number 11, Crosstown Connect Community Compact. Number 12, waiver of fees, Recreation Department Bridge to Turkey fundraising race, September 13th. Number 13, committee appointment, Pamela, I'm going to say it the Italian way, Cicchetti, but, you know, I don't know. Yeah? Oh, okay, great. Oh, Palma. Gee, I missed up the first one. All right. We've got a lot of angry Italian teachers from college that won't be happy. Full member, Acton Boxborough Cultural Council. Committee appointment, Gary Kilpatrick, full member, Land Stewardship Committee. Number 15, committee appointment, Dean Charter, full member, Senior Center Study Committee. Well, we can no longer call him just Citizen Charter, it was short-lived. Number 16, committee appointment, David Wellingoff, South Acton Train Station Advisory Committee. He will be the Finance Committee representative. Number 17, approved to release executive sessions for July 28th, 2010, September 27th, 2010, November 1st, 2010, November 22nd, 2010, and August 8th, 2011. Number 18, approved meeting minutes, August 20th, 2014, December 15th, 2014, January 10th, 2015, February 23rd, 2015, April 27th, 2015, May 18th, 2015, and June 8th, 2015. Approve executive sessions, I assume that means minutes, June 8th, 2015. Accept gift Recreation Department Pro Tech Incorporated gift totaling $1,000 to support the 2015 Summer Concert Series and special events at Nara Park. Accept gift Recreation Department from an anonymous citizen totaling $1,000 towards a classical music concert held on June 20th at Nara Park. Request to dispose of obsolete items, Memorial Library. Number 23, Highway Department declaration of surplus property, and number 24, request to dispose of surplus and obsolete equipment, ActonTV. Okay, so we held number 9, the one-day license for optometrics.
My only question was that was an event where there were going to be at least 50 people showing up, and there was no police chief memo saying okay. The person who was applying also said that there would be no tip certified or equivalent bartender, and I just was concerned that, you know, according to the application, if you have 50 or more guests expected, you're supposed to have some sort of a bartender. It doesn't have to be tip certified, and I didn't know what.
Yeah, and we discussed this before,
we
prior
gotten
to the
any more
meeting, and it sounds like we haven't gotten the chief's approval, so I think since there's time, we have another meeting
Okay.
before there, that will just
Okay.
pull this
Okay.
off for tonight. So does anybody want to make a motion for the consent agenda, less item number 9?
Well, move to approve all the items on consent agenda except for item 9.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. And while this wasn't posted, we didn't foresee that not being posted, so we'd like to do the reappointments for all committees in 2015. So I don't think anybody has any concerns with this, but if somebody could just make a motion to that effect. Item 2, okay.
I move that we reappoint all present members of committees. Is that what?
Charlie, do you want to tell us how to do it correctly? Right. Right.
Okay. And how have they, indicated that?
They tell their board. Yeah.
Okay, so you know who those are? Okay, so exists a list of all the people? Okay.
They're on it.
Okay. I move that we reappoint all the people who indicated that they want to be reappointed to their present committees.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Any questions or anything people want to bring up in their selectmen report? Excellent. Okay, then can we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Anybody want a second? Moving to adjourn. This is a weird one to not second.
I'll argue for it.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's 9:20.
Peter,
Second.
thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Okay, thank you all very much.